They mocked me for being an orphan, right before I walked down the aisle, and just when I thought I was completely alone, a man stood up from the crowd and said, "That's my daughter." "Hi, I'm Blythe." And this is the story of how I went from abandoned and humiliated to standing center stage beside the father I never knew, Oscar-winning director Reginald Quinn. But trust me, it didn't happen overnight. You're about to see betrayal, lies, a broken wedding, and the kind of revenge you don't come back from. Have you ever been dismissed because of where you came from? Or had someone try to rewrite your worth? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. Let me take you back to the day everything was supposed to go perfectly. 3 days before the wedding, I asked Corbin something simple while we were flipping through the seating chart. "Do you think I could invite a couple people from the home?" I meant the orphanage, the only place that had ever felt remotely like family. He didn't look up, just circled another name in gold ink and muttered, "It's not really the vibe we're going for." I should have known then. I had always imagined my wedding day would begin with warmth, with love, with someone telling me I looked beautiful, not with silence, and certainly not with shame. Yet there I was, standing in the bridal suite of the Thorne Estate's grand ballroom, being zipped into a gown I didn't choose, by women who never bothered to ask if I was okay. The room smelled of lilies and cold perfume. Gold accents glinted off the chandelier above me, a polished lie of luxury. Vivica Thorne, my future mother-in-law, circled around me like a designer hawk. Her gaze traveled from the hem of my dress to my bare shoulders, her smile razor-thin. "No one to walk you down the aisle?" she asked, her voice soft enough to almost pass for polite. I tried to answer, but my throat closed. She tilted her head and added, "Don't worry, dear. At least your dress is expensive. We can't let the guests pity you too much." I stared straight ahead, willing myself not to cry. Vivica didn't want tears. She wanted obedience. 15 minutes later, I stood alone behind the double doors of the ballroom. My reflection stared back from the lacquered glass, a woman in ivory silk with trembling hands and no family in sight. My mother had died years ago. I had never known my father. And now, as I waited to walk down the aisle, the truth sat like a brick in my chest. I had no one here. The music swelled. The doors opened. A wave of whispers greeted me. I kept my chin high, ignoring the way heads tilted toward one another. I imagined I could hear their thoughts. "Isn't she the one with no parents? How sad. How lucky she landed Corbin." I walked slowly, counting each step like a beat of survival. As I moved down the aisle, the light hit my earrings. Small, old silver teardrops. The only thing I had from my mother. I imagined her watching from somewhere. I imagined she'd be furious. When I reached the altar, Corbin took my hand, smiling for the cameras. His grip was firm, performative. He didn't look at me, only at the crowd. The officiant began to speak, and I noticed Vivica sitting in the front row, whispering into the ear of a perfectly coiffed woman beside her. "She may not have parents," Vivica said, "but at least she knows how to smile for the camera." The woman chuckled. I heard it. I felt it. My stomach knotted, but I said nothing. Corbin squeezed my fingers. I looked at him, silently begging for backup, for a signal that I wasn't entirely alone in this circus. He just smiled wider and leaned slightly toward the photographer. Later, at the reception, I sat like a statue beside Corbin as the toasts began. The best man gave a speech full of college memories and sports references. Then came Vivica. She raised her champagne glass. "To Corbin," she said, her voice warm, loud, and clear. "For having the courage and compassion to love beyond bloodlines, to welcome someone who came from, well, very little." Laughter followed. Not from everyone, but enough to burn. I stood. I hadn't planned to speak. Hell, I hadn't planned to breathe beyond what was necessary. But something broke. Maybe it was dignity. Maybe it was rage. As I passed a young server holding a tray, his eyes flicked to me and then to Vivica. He bit his lip, then whispered so only I could hear, "You don't deserve this." I didn't know him. But that moment steadied me. I stepped forward, took the mic, and stared straight at Vivica. "I may not have a family crest," I said, "but at least I know how to treat people with decency." The room reacted like a dropped glass, gasps, murmurs, fragments of shame in every direction. The music cut out mid-note. A camera flash went off just as Vivica's smile slipped. I looked around. The chandelier's reflection shimmered on the marble floor like broken crowns. No one met my eyes. I left the mic on the table and walked out. No tears. No explanation. Outside, the night air was sharp and biting. The wind picked up my veil and dragged it behind me like a flag of surrender I refused to carry. My heels clicked against the stone steps in a rhythm that felt almost like freedom. Somewhere above, a pair of eyes followed me. A man stood on the upper balcony, unmoving, dressed in a dark suit that caught no light. He pulled out a phone and dialed. "She's not alone anymore," he said. "It's time she knew who her real father is." The morning after the wedding disaster, I woke up in a hotel room I didn't remember checking into. The makeup was smeared across my cheek like a bruise that hadn't healed. My phone was buzzing nonstop. Calls from Corbin, texts from unknown numbers, half-hearted apologies, and some not-so-subtle warnings to clean up the mess before it got worse. The video had already hit social media. Someone, probably that nosy cousin of Corbin's, had uploaded the clip of my toast at the reception. The camera had caught Vivica's exact expression as I said it. Paused, zoomed, memed. "At least I know how to treat people with decency," was trending. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. I scrolled past the comments, some cheering me on, others accusing me of ruining a perfect day. As if the day hadn't already been rotten before I opened my mouth. I remembered the moment the wedding invitation was finalized. Vivica had insisted on approving every word. "It should read, 'Together with the Thorne family,'" she said. I asked gently, "Shouldn't we include something for my mom?" Vivica raised a brow. "There's no one else listed on your side, dear. Simpler is classier." The invitation went to print that night. No mention of Mira Rowan, not even in loving memory. At the time, I told myself I didn't care. But looking at the invitation now, crumpled in my bag, it stung worse than I expected. Have you ever been made to feel like your family history was something to erase? Like your name, your roots, your love were just inconvenient? If that kind of silence hurts you too, drop a number 7 in the comments. Now, let's see how deep the truth goes. By noon, I was back at my old apartment. The Thorne estate had been suffocating. My own place, though small and dusty, felt like air. The quiet was a mercy. I sat at the kitchen table with the box my mother had left me. I'd brought it back from storage years ago but never dared to open it fully. Until now. Inside, I found photos I had seen before. Me as a toddler. Birthday cards from social workers, drawings with shaky crayon handwriting. But tucked underneath the yellowed paper doily was something I hadn't noticed before. A cassette tape, labeled in my mother's handwriting. I fumbled to set the tape in the player. When I pressed play, the machine clicked loudly, a sharp mechanical sound that broke the silence like a match snapping. "If you're hearing this," it began, her voice cracking through the static, "it means I never told you who he was. I wanted to, Blythe, I swear I did. But I was scared you'd go looking." I froze. The voice felt like a ghost crawling through the walls. "He was famous once," she continued. But he chose the spotlight over us. Still, you deserve to know. That night, I couldn't sleep. I dug through more of her things until I found an old envelope, water-stained and sealed with wax. Inside was a photo, torn, brittle, with a man's arm around my mother, his face mostly cropped out, and a letter. Only the initials remained. RQ. Beneath the envelope was something heavier, a keychain shaped like a director's clapboard. On the back, engraved in fading script, to Mira, keep telling stories. I grabbed my laptop and searched the initials. Dozens of results. I narrowed them to film, directing, America. And then, there he was. Reginald Quinn. Director. Visionary. Legend. Reclusive. He hadn't made a movie in nearly a decade, but every headline still called him iconic. He had vanished from the spotlight just after the year I was born. I stared at his photo. High cheekbones, slight widow's peak, cold gray eyes. Something in my stomach turned. Could this really be him? Could this man, this distant, untouchable myth, be my father? The next morning, I went back to my childhood neighborhood to clear my head. As I stood near the boarded-up community center where I used to volunteer, I felt a presence behind me. "You look just like her," a voice said. I turned fast. A man stood there, late 40s maybe, well-dressed but unassuming. He didn't approach, just held up his hands as if to say, "I'm not a threat." "Who are you?" I asked. "Ansel Briggs," he replied. "I work with Reginald Quinn." My mouth went dry. "That's impossible." "It's not. He sent me." "Why?" "To find you, because he believes you're his daughter." I didn't speak. I couldn't. "He never knew about you," Ansel added. "Not until recently. Someone from Mira's old theater company came forward. She'd kept your birth quiet. But there were signs." I narrowed my eyes. "Prove it." Ansel reached into his coat and pulled out a folder. Inside was a DNA test. Mira Rowan, 99.998% maternal match to Blythe Rowan. The second sheet, still sealed, was the pending paternity test against Reginald Quinn. "He's doing his part," Ansel said gently. "And he wants to meet you?" I swallowed hard. "This is too much." He nodded. "I get that. But he's waiting." "For what?" "For you." I didn't answer. Just stood there as the wind picked up again, dragging the hem of my coat across the pavement like it had something to say. That evening, back at my apartment, I sat at the table again, staring at the cassette player, at my mother's looping script, at the letter I never opened. The bulb above me flickered twice before holding steady, casting a warm pool of light over the photos spread across the table. I had always thought being an orphan meant not knowing where you came from. I was wrong. It's also not knowing if you want to find out. It took me a full 24 hours to decide. Not because I wasn't curious, but because something about this entire thing, Ansel, the tape, the test, felt too big to just say yes to. But I said yes anyway. Ansel picked me up the next morning in a sleek black town car. The inside smelled like leather and cedar, and for the first 5 minutes, we drove in silence. I stared out the window while Chicago blurred by. I wasn't dressed up, just jeans, boots, a coat thick enough to fight the February chill. Still, I felt exposed, like I was walking into a scene I hadn't been cast for. "He's nervous," Ansel said at one point. I turned. "Reginald Quinn doesn't strike me as the nervous type." Ansel smiled faintly. "He is when it matters." We pulled into a private estate in Malibu an hour later. Ocean cliffs behind us, glass panels everywhere, a modernist castle perched in sunlight. I followed Ansel inside. Every step I took, I imagined my mother had taken once too. Mira, younger, before the loss, before hiding. He was waiting in a long hallway lined with black and white production stills, photos from his old films. I recognized some of them from film school. Others I only knew from interviews. And then he turned around. Reginald Quinn looked older than his headshots. More real. The kind of man who carried silence like a weapon. His suit was charcoal gray. Simple but perfect. His expression unreadable. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. I kept my distance. "I wasn't either." He took a step closer but stopped short. "I didn't know. Your mother, she never told me." "I know," I said. "She didn't tell me either." Reginald exhaled, then gestured toward a wide glass room at the end of the hall. "Will you sit with me?" I followed him into what looked like a home screening room. Plush chairs, a curved wall of floor-to-ceiling windows behind a massive screen. A single reel-to-reel projector sat idle in the back. "She used to love this room," he said. The light at sunset said it made the ocean feel like theater. I nodded. Words didn't come easily here. "I've watched your mother on film 100 times, he said, voice low. But the realist version of her was always off camera. He walked over to a cabinet and pulled out a film canister. This was shot at a cabin in Oregon. No crew, no script, just the two of us. She was incandescent. He slid the reel onto the projector and dimmed the lights. The bulb flickered to life, casting that warm, grainy glow I remembered from college screenings. And then, there she was. Mira, laughing, spinning in a field of dry grass, holding a camera of her own. She pointed it at him, at us, now. Her voice, younger and lighter, shouted, "You're not supposed to film me laughing." In the background, I heard Reginald, his voice, unguarded, playful. "But that's when you're most alive." I couldn't breathe. He paused the film. Silence returned, like gravity. "I didn't come back to her," he said. "And I should have. But when I learned about you, I knew I couldn't miss twice." I blinked fast. "The test?" He nodded. "It came back this morning. I didn't open it. I thought we should do that together." He reached into a drawer and placed the sealed envelope between us. My hands trembled as I opened it. Probability of paternity, 99.99997%. I looked up. Reginald's jaw clenched, but his eyes softened. "I don't want to force anything," he said. "But if you'll let me, I'd like to know you." I didn't answer right away. I stared at the screen still frozen on my mother's face, half laugh, half surprised. "She used to hum when she cooked," I said suddenly. "Only jazz." "Nina Simone," he smiled. "She taught me how to listen." I glanced at the keychain in my pocket, the little clapboard that once said, "Keep telling stories." "She'd hate how much I needed this," I whispered. "Needed what?" "Proof. Connection. A reason to believe someone out there cared enough to come back." Reginald didn't flinch. "Then let's build it. Whatever we missed, we can start now." The light outside had shifted. Golden, streaked with cloud. It flooded the room in warmth. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was floating alone. Later, before I left, he handed me something. "A draft," he said, "of a new film. Based on your mother. I haven't shown it to anyone." I held it like a secret. The title page read, "Inheritance." "You wrote this?" "I lived it," he said. As I stepped back into the car, the envelope still in my hand, I realized something else. This wasn't just about finding out where I came from. It was about choosing who I became next. I hadn't planned to go back to the Thorns house, but apparently, rehearsal dinners don't cancel themselves. Even after your wedding turns into a viral scandal and your toast exposes your in-laws as elitist snobs to millions. Corbin texted me, of course. "Let's just get through this, Blythe," he wrote. "One last formality." I should have said no, but I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to feel the shift, when the control they used to have over me began to slip. I didn't tell Reginald I was going. He'd just handed me the script to Inheritance and said, "Don't let them write your ending." I had no idea how much that line would stick with me. The Thorns' estate looked just as fake as ever. Spanish-tiled roof, grand archways, guests in pastel suits and polished smiles. The rehearsal had already happened. This was really just an image management party. I arrived late on purpose. Vivica spotted me the moment I stepped onto the terrace. She was in head-to-toe ivory silk, as if she were the one getting married. Her smile tightened. "Blythe," she purred, air kissing the air near my cheek. "So glad you decided to be civil." "I wouldn't miss it," I said, brushing past her. The room was full of familiar faces, Corbin's fraternity friends, his aunts from the coast, a couple of local news personalities. I caught Amber Fox in the corner, pretending to sip wine while clearly scanning for sound bites. No one greeted me like they used to. They just watched. I made my way to the back, where I could see the full layout: gold-rimmed plates, cascading floral centerpieces, and a seating chart that placed me next to a hedge. Classy. One of Vivica's friends stopped by my table with a gift, a book, wrapped in cream ribbon. "I saw this and thought of you," she said. I unwrapped it slowly. How to Navigate High Society. Of course. "That's thoughtful," I said, deadpan. "I'll be sure to highlight the part where you marry into it." The woman blushed and quickly retreated. Corbin approached not long after. His smile was half-hearted, his voice even more so. "You look better than I expected." "You mean not hysterical?" He didn't respond. "You still planning to go through with this?" I asked. He shifted uncomfortably. "Let's just get to the end." "Whose end?" He turned away before answering. Then came the toasts. Vivica stood up like she was accepting an award. "I just want to thank everyone," she said, raising her glass, "for supporting our family. Through thick and thin. Through uncertainty. Through unpredictable additions." The crowd chuckled. Some looked confused. She smiled wider. And to Corbin, my rock, for embracing love without conditions, even when it comes from, well, unusual places. I gripped my glass tighter. Somewhere behind me, I heard someone exhale sharply. Amber was already typing. Then Vivica raised her glass toward me. "To the bride. Proof that sometimes background doesn't matter. Character does." I stood. The room hushed. Even the clink of cutlery stopped. One woman froze mid-bite, fork in the air. A chandelier above us flickered as if sensing the tension, the light catching the rim of my water glass just so, fractured reflections dancing across the tablecloth. "I've always wondered what it's like," I said, "to be part of a family, to feel included, to be seen." A few heads nodded cautiously. "And tonight," I continued, "I got my answer." I reached into my clutch and pulled out a sleek little speaker. Tapped a button. Vivica's voice filled the room. She may not have parents, but at least she knows how to smile for the camera. The audio echoed off the high vaulted ceiling. A pause. Then the unmistakable crash of glass. Someone had dropped their wine. The tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Gasps rippled. A couple sitting near the front exchanged looks. One of the servers visibly flinched. Corbin closed his eyes. Vivica went pale. "I've been recording," I said simply. "Because memory is unreliable, but audio is forever." I let it play for a few more seconds, just enough for her to say, "We can't let the guests pity her too much." Then I shut it off. "I'm done pretending," I said, setting the speaker down. "Done shrinking." I walked past Vivica as she stood frozen, then stopped just long enough to whisper, "Next time, try being decent without needing an audience." As I turned to leave, I caught Amber's eye. Her smirk told me I'd just handed her a headline. Outside, the night was cooler than expected. The wind tugged at the string lights above the terrace, casting long shadows across the cobblestone. I didn't notice the black car waiting until the window rolled down. Reginald sat inside, his expression unreadable. "Get in," he said. I slid in without hesitation. "I take it dinner was productive?" I nodded. "They know now." "Good," he said, "because tomorrow they'll know who you belong to." The morning of what should have been my wedding day arrived with skies that couldn't decide whether to rain or burn. Chicago's skyline looked distant and strangely unreal, as if it belonged to someone else's life. But this time, I wasn't watching from the sidelines. I stood beside Reginald Quinn on the steps of the Lyra Hotel, where Corbin and I were supposed to exchange vows. Instead of a veil, I wore a tailored black pantsuit. No bouquet, no smile, just purpose. "You don't have to do this," Reginald said quietly. "I know," I replied, "but I'm going to." Inside, the grand ballroom had been transformed. Flowers still bloomed at the altar. Rows of guests still filled the chairs. Only this time, the bride wasn't walking down the aisle to be claimed. She was coming to claim the truth. Cameras had already begun flashing the moment I stepped through the doors. The sound of shutters was a static crackle behind every step. Amber Fox stood off to one side with her crew, waiting for whatever headline I was about to hand her. Vivica turned in her seat and blanched when she saw Reginald beside me. The whispers started instantly. "That's Reginald Quinn. Is that her father? What is going on?" Corbin stood at the front, his tie already loosened. He didn't move when I entered, just stared like he wasn't sure if I was real. The chandeliers above us flickered briefly, just once, as if the air had shifted with the weight of something unsaid. I took the microphone from the DJ's stand before anyone else could intercept me. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "Even though today's event isn't quite what you expected." A few chuckles. Mostly confusion. The low hum of ambient strings playing from the speakers made the moment feel suspended, like we were inside a scene waiting to be written. I was supposed to stand here today and say, "I do." But what I've realized is that I don't. I don't agree to being silenced. I don't agree to being erased. And I definitely don't agree to spending my life with someone who stood by while his family treated me like I was unworthy. Eyes flicked toward Vivica. She stiffened but said nothing. "But I'm not here to relive that," I continued. "I'm here to say something new." I stepped aside and gestured toward Reginald. "This is Reginald Quinn. He's a director, a storyteller, a man I've never known, until this week. He's also my father. Have you ever had to reclaim your truth? In front of the very people who once tried to erase you? That burning mix of fear and pride when you finally say, 'I belong here.' If you've ever stood your ground like that, type 9 in the comments. Let's see how this moment rewrites everything." Gasps. Audible this time. A glass clinked sharply in the back. Someone had dropped it out of sheer reflex. The room absorbed the sound like a slap. And for the first time, I understand what it means to have someone choose you. Not because they have to, but because they want to. Reginald didn't speak. He didn't have to. His presence beside me said enough. Vivica stood up then. "This is highly inappropriate." "No," I cut in. "What's inappropriate is mocking an orphan at her own wedding. What's inappropriate is controlling every narrative except the truth." Corbin took a step forward. "Blythe, please. Can we talk privately?" I looked him in the eyes. "You had your chance." I turned to the audience again. The music faded out, leaving only the rustle of fabric and anxious throat clears. I grew up wondering what I was missing. I thought family was something you earned by being agreeable. But I was wrong. Family is who stands beside you when the masks fall. Reginald stepped closer. And who defends your name when no one else will? A hush fell over the room. Even the chandelier lights seemed to dim slightly, as if the entire space leaned in to listen. Amber Fox stepped forward, mic raised. Mr. Quinn, does this mean you're confirming paternity publicly? Reginald's voice rang out clearly. Yes. Blythe is my daughter. He said it with no shame, no hesitation, just pride. A man in the second row removed his glasses, blinking slowly. Two women in matching fascinators exchanged glances, their smiles forced and eyes unsteady. It was the subtle shift of a room seeing power realign in real time. I glanced around the room. Some faces registered shock. Others, like Corbin's, looked stricken. But most stayed silent. Which was fine. I wasn't here for applause. I was here for myself. Later that evening, I walked out into the cold night air. The sky had finally chosen. Rain fell in slow, deliberate drops. Each one hit like punctuation. Reginald handed me a folded scarf. That was brave. That was overdue. He looked at me. You still want to be part of the project? I nodded. More than ever. Then let's rewrite everything. We stood there, father and daughter under the rain and the echo of 1,000 disapproving stares behind us, none of which mattered anymore. Because for the first time in my life, I had stepped into the center of the frame, and I wasn't leaving. 2 weeks after what should have been my wedding, I stepped onto a soundstage in Los Angeles and stood in front of the cameras, not as a stand-in, not as a behind-the-scenes intern, not even as someone clinging to someone else's spotlight. This time, I was the story. Reginald had called it a soft announcement, but nothing about it felt small. The air buzzed with quiet tension, the hum of high-end film lights overhead, the quiet clicks of press cameras circling like moths. Behind me, the title screen stood frozen in bold serif, Inheritance, a film by Reginald Quinn and Blythe Rowan. Amber Fox was there, of course. So were critics, journalists, old rivals, and new allies. And somewhere near the back of the lot, I knew Vivica was watching. Whether from a streaming link or her perfectly curated phone. Corbin had vanished to Europe under the guise of recovery. But this wasn't about them anymore. This was about what came next. Reginald stood beside me, his hands behind his back like a director on opening night. His nod was subtle, but it grounded me. I stepped forward to the microphone. Thank you for being here, I said. Some of you know parts of my story, others only know the version that was designed for them. But today, I'm sharing the version I wrote myself. A pause. I was orphaned young. I spent years believing I was a burden someone else had to carry, and for a while, I let that belief decide who I dated, who I trusted, what I allowed people to take from me, including my voice. I glanced at the screen behind me. But pain isn't the whole story. Silence isn't the end of it. And when I met my father, when I learned who my mother really was, and who she had loved, I realized that I came from people who told stories. Loudly, bravely, honestly. Reginald looked down, his eyes unreadable, but I saw the pride in the stillness of his jaw. This film isn't revenge, it's reclamation. It's our truth. And if you see parts of yourself in it, I hope you feel less alone. There were no dramatic gasps this time, no crashing wine glasses, just a rising hush, the kind that happens when people truly listen. Later, after the announcement ended, we gave one-on-one interviews. Amber was last. She waited until the others had gone before stepping in, recorder in hand. I have to say, she began, this whole arc, from disgrace to DNA to debut, is cinematic. I smiled. That's the idea. She leaned forward. Tell me, Blythe, what do you say to people who think you're leveraging your story for sympathy? I met her gaze without blinking. I say, isn't that what stories are for? To make someone feel something real? She paused. You're not the same girl who got mocked at her own wedding. No, I said. She was scared. I'm not anymore. Amber nodded. Recorder still running. And what about Vivica Thorne? I didn't flinch. She'll have to decide who she is when she's not the one pulling the strings. Amber raised a brow. And Corbin? Gone, I said simply, and irrelevant. Afterward, Reginald and I walked the back lot in silence. Crews were breaking down lights. The last of the media was gone. A breeze tugged at the fabric banners over the studio wall, where our title fluttered, Inheritance. He finally said, You were composed. I was honest. That too, he said, smiling faintly. We passed the old sound booth. A PA left the door open, and for a moment, I heard a voice. My own, from the playback monitors. I stopped to listen. It was the narration I'd written for the final scene of the film. Sometimes the past isn't behind you. Sometimes it's stitched into your name. But if you're lucky, if you're brave, you get to decide what you pass on. I swallowed hard. Reginald placed a hand on my shoulder. You wrote the ending better than I could have. I turned to him. Number we did. That night, I sat in my apartment. New, quiet, mine. On the wall hung a framed still from our teaser trailer. A photo of me, walking toward camera, eyes steady. My phone buzzed. A text from a contact labeled only M. She would have been proud. For a second, I didn't move. Then I smiled. I opened my laptop and began writing again. Not for the film. For me. Not as a victim. Not even as a survivor. But as the author of my own name. I am no longer the girl who was humiliated at her own wedding. Today, I am the woman standing on stage, owning my story, proud of my name and my past, defined by no one but myself. I've reclaimed my voice, my dignity, and the freedom I should have always had. What I've learned is this. No one has the right to diminish your worth just because your beginnings weren't perfect. When you choose to rise, the truth finds its voice, louder, clearer, and undeniable. Those who build crowns on lies will eventually bow to justice. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been judged unfairly because of your past? Betrayed by those you trusted the most? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if my journey resonated with you, hit subscribe and stay with me for what's coming next. Because where truth speaks, power listens.